Okay, Luther.
Okay, yeah, military and expat voting, the question is, where would you draw the line? How far would you go? Minnesota says they've solved the problem with conventional means, but other states are proposing internet voting, voting by mail, email, voting by fax. West Virginia just did a test that cost them $1,100 a vote for internet voting, and they claimed it was a success. If you vote by email or fax, there's some employee in your town hall copying the vote to a regular thing. They know how you voted. So how far would you go? Where would you draw the line?
A lot of attention is being paid to this issue of military voting right now, and we are all very sympathetic to the issue. We have to allow people their right to vote even if they're overseas. So first of all, I'm strongly committed to that. We have an incident that just happened in eastern Connecticut we were talking about, where actually the person is in Afghanistan and wasn't allowed to vote on a school referendum, even though he has children in the schools, because the ballot wasn't ready in time. These are sort of structural issues. I guess I'd say I'd put that to the test. There has to be a balance between that person's right and the cost. You know, you can't just say it can cost any amount. It seems to me that it's a structural problem in timing. And we need to make the absentee ballot process needs a lot of work. It's very cumbersome right now. There's a lot of paper involved. But it seems to me if we could just get the timing down and get them ready sooner. And you and I have talked a lot about the integrity issues. Integrity of the ballot is a real issue when you're talking about things being mailed from overseas. But it seems to me we have to be able to overcome those to allow people to vote. I think I wouldn't go first to electronic voting. It's so expensive. It seems to me we could do a lot more with just getting the applications out earlier and getting the ballots ready earlier, which has been an issue anyway. We need to do a lot of work on that. Somebody else? Gosh, really?
Do you admire Oregon's system of voting?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
And explain to me, how does that differ from just plain absentee balloting?
Well, in this state, of course, you have to have a reason that you're not going to be in town to vote before you can use an absentee ballot. So you're asked to check that off on a little thing. And I think a lot of people, frankly, lie. I mean, they say I can't be here because they need to, for whatever reason, use an absentee ballot. It's a particularly big problem in that border areas of the state where people work in New York and live in Connecticut, and a lot of them just routinely do it. We ought to make it easy. You know, why they have a no-fault system. Basically, you can use an absentee ballot anytime you want. I have to say we have had problems with absentee ballot fraud. You have to be very careful with these things, and so you'd have to make sure you have the integrity issues covered before you did that. And that goes back to having a decent statewide electronic voter file. I mean, I don't understand why we don't have a system where when you go to vote, there's someone sitting there with a little computer that can check whether you're registered, check whether you're registered somewhere else in the state. And then we could get to things like the Oregon system or the thing that I prefer the sort of early voting system they have in Florida. I went and canvassed in 2000 for Gore. Remember the hanging Chad election? And down there, they vote for, I think it's 10 days. And they vote in every public library is a place you can vote. And it's during regular hours. Plenty of time to check to make sure that you're registered and, you know, if you're properly voting, because we have a lot of issues with that. If you try to do same-day registration, the problem is there's no way really to check whether you're registered somewhere else, so there's a lot of potential for problems there. I know that because at UConn, 2 years ago in the presidential election, we had 7,000 kids showed up to vote on election day. Many of them were not registered, and it was really a difficult situation. So we've got to be able to solve some of that. I think a good voter file could solve a lot of these problems. But I'd be open to almost any form of early voting. I think what I would do is ask people who are involved with this all the time. I put together a group, you know, of registrars, clerks, citizens, people interested in these things, and try to come up with a solution that would work for Connecticut.
Is any consideration being given to weekend voting?
Not right now. You know, right now the problem is cost. And I'm hearing, you know, we have all these ideas, but the truth is a lot of these cost more money. And that's been the issue with early voting, which is, I think, taken care of by the fact that libraries are open anyway, so, you know, it wouldn't be very costly. But I think when you start talking about weekend voting, I mean, it's the same problem. If you're adding a day, that adds a big expense to the towns. People have suggested we should go to regional voting, you know, and that's probably greeted the same way everything regional is that we propose. Not very well in small towns. So I think rather than fighting those kinds of fights, which I think it's almost like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, as they say, you know, instead of getting into big arguments about home rule and so forth, it seems to me a lot of these issues could be solved with a very good statewide voter file. And if everyone were on a computer, you could have a pretty good system where you could do it, still vote locally, you could still vote at other times even perhaps, but the cost is an issue.
How early is early?
It depends. Different states, some states have experimented with this already. Like I say, in Florida, they can vote for 10 days. So there's not just one day. You vote for 10 days during regular hours, and you vote at libraries. So there's not one spot you go to. And, you know, I mean, we're so used to a system where everyone has to show up on one day at one particular location. They've just sort of turned that on its head, and they've said, well, if it should be easy, why not do it for 10 days? And that's what they do. And it seems to work very well. Now, I don't know if it actually increases voter participation. I think it would be interesting to look at the data. I know the Pew Foundation has done some research on that. And I'm told by those of you, like maybe Luther, we talked about this a little bit, I'd have to be convinced that it actually, A, didn't cost more money, because right now we just can't increase costs locally for towns or for the state. But if it didn't cost more money and it actually increased voter participation, I think it's well worth doing. Anybody else? Well, thank you.